Hello, hello. What is up, everyone? Welcome to this episode of the TSMU Q&A series. I'm your host, guide, spiritual TSMU leader, Christian Homili. If some of you haven't seen me before, a little bit of an intro to myself is I'm the global sales executive for TSM. I work with brands, I make deals, and I'm really the first introduction brands have into TSM. Also come up with some awesome, fun activations that help pitch TSM and esports. Today, we're actually joined by an extremely special guest, Edwin Jung. How are you doing, man?
Hey guys, I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, Edwin is going to be helping us chat about life and his journey into being a team manager. Before we do that, though, I just wanted to throw a quick reminder slash overview for those who have not seen the show. For this Q&A, we'll be pulling questions from the TSMU Discord. So if you have any questions for Edwin, head to discord.gg/TSMU and ask your questions in the Ask Stream Questions Here channel. Once you've asked your question, you can either join the waiting room voice channel if you're a voice com and wait to be selected to join us for the show. While people get their questions in, Edwin, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and what you do as your role as a team manager?
Right, so yeah, my name is Edwin, also known as Minus Tempo. As a team manager for TSM, right now I manage the Apex, Dota 2, Fortnite, and Smash players. And the long story short is I just make sure that the players themselves have what they need, and that their schedules are aligned with essentially what TSM would like out of the players themselves. That can include things like tournaments, events, content creator events as well. Just kind of the liaison between the players and the org.
Yeah, I mean, guys, if you don't really know, his role is pretty much the lifeline between a lot of competitive teams. Players, though they are very smart and everything they could do in the game, they could not possibly do it all. And Edwin really helps make their schedules live on a day to day and allow them to just focus on competing. So I could tell you from the sales side, Edwin, our team always appreciates having you guys on board because without you guys, our players would not be around slash existing. We actually have a few questions jump in and we'll kind of get straight to it. Kathy asks, can you describe your responsibilities during a typical week in this position?
Yeah, so typical week just involves keeping track of the tournaments that they're playing in over the next 2 or 3 weeks, just because the tournament schedule is quite flexible, as well as the results on how they're doing. If it's a team game, then obviously how the team is doing, like together, whether things are starting to fall apart or if there's things that they're talking about on stream that they would like. Just tuning into the stream while they're playing in events like that helps me build a relationship with the player so that they don't have to come to me to ask. Like I've been watching their stream, so I know that uh, this player's mouse is starting to have like a double click glitch. Then I can already preemptively order that. And when they do end up asking me, I've already taken care of that, and they feel more appreciative when things like that are done. And then just planning out the content schedule, making sure that they're available for the org to film YouTube videos, shorts, what is that, sponsorship and partnership requests. And yeah, that's pretty much it on a week to week basis.
I've always found that those are very interesting, unique skills slash honestly a really cool, interesting responsibility that's pretty unique a lot of times to esports and maybe even a little bit of traditional sports. But I actually was kind of curious on how you honestly a little bit of your story and how you really, I guess, came to where you are. I think it's such a unique job offering as you kind of listed off in your responsibilities. So I'm sure a lot of our viewers are kind of curious on like how is it like in college that you know what I mean, like how do I navigate that path from college into doing something like this, because I really do think it's awesome and something unique to esports, which I'm sure anyone in the esports community could say, okay, there's no maybe a necessary major, or if there is, it's very unique to certain colleges. How did you find yourself there?
Honestly, I was just in the right place at the right time. Before my job here at TSM, I was actually a Kumon Learning Center instructor. And that's just a after school program that I believe a lot of different countries have. And my plan earlier was, hey, I'm gonna work at this learning center. Eventually, I'll buy the center out and be a franchise owner, and that'll be my job. But when COVID came along, I my hours got cut quite heavily, and I ended up playing a lot of Apex with my brother. He's actually the one who got me into playing Apex, which is where I credit all of this to. Because if he never convinced me to play Apex, then I wouldn't be here. Um, but yeah, no, like, so I was originally supposed to be a business owner, but then I started watching a lot of Apex, playing a lot of Apex, and I found a couple things that essentially the Twitch community wanted, but it wasn't readily available to them. A lot of what people will know me for right now in the Apex community is a scorekeeper. I essentially created a program that kept track of scores based on an image I picked up from the match summary, and it would do that within. It would pump out the data. It would take in the data and pump it out within like a minute or so, and then I could post those scores in the appropriate Twitch chats based on which teams are playing. So I did that for about a year or so and slowly started to build up the trust of a lot of the pros where they would set me up with mods so that I can just edit those commands myself instead of me sending it to one of their mods and them doing it. Once that reputation built up between me and the pros, then they started asking if I could do more things like hosting scrims and helping out tournament organizers with the Apex events. Because when a new sponsor tries to enter the Apex scene, it is, as a BR, it is quite different than your average FPS game. So sometimes they don't know a lot of the intricacies of the Apex pros as well as the community, and I'm essentially just there to facilitate that. And I did that for all of that together, kind of bundles into about a year and a half. And when TSM posted that they needed a player manager, one of the players, Jordan, who a lot of you guys know as reps, said, "Hey, I mean, you're kind of already doing this for us anyway. I think you should apply for this position, right?" And then I did, and here I am.
That's awesome.
Essentially got vouchers from a lot of uh, all the Apex guys on TSM, as well as used a lot of the other Apex pros on different orgs as a reference. And then, yeah, that's how I wound up here. I actually don't have a degree because I never finished it. My software engineering that I started, I quit that when I moved to a different city. And then I started a degree in chemical engineering. But then I got an opportunity to open up a business. And since I realized I didn't want to do a 9 to 5 job, I essentially opened up my own business and then did the learning center thing that I mentioned earlier on the side.
Oh, that's super awesome, and I think that's just an amazing narrative in terms of I think exactly what you were saying earlier, where it is a lot of timing, but I think
Mhm.
it's almost timing that you, in my opinion, did a great job setting up, right? Like I think it was okay. Here's the Kumon opportunity door closing, and you just kept at it with your own passions, which led you to the right connections. And I think if the viewers take anything from it, is that don't just say, oh, like you need to know somebody to get in versus if you follow your passions and look for those right opportune moments, you almost create those lines towards the connections all the way to a point where a player, a professional player is giving you a vouch, which is really cool too. If you guys are all wondering how close we are or how close the players are to the company itself, it goes all the way to that they offer someone else and it's based off relationships, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also really cool narrative because I on Kumon because I know a lot of cousins who are still in Kumon or whatnot, and I think there was an interesting narrative 10 years back where it's like their parents, my aunts and uncles, are not letting them play games, so the fact that it kind of made that switch as a teacher is right on and kind of really cool to speak to our generation.
Yeah, not gonna lie, the
Mhm.
whole Kumon thing is what, because I took Kumon when I was younger as
Yep.
well, and honestly, that is what helped me. Like, that's what made me enjoy math and programming and statistics and stuff like that in general. And No, yeah, as much as I didn't want to do it at the time when I was younger, the fact that my parents forced me to do it turned out very well in my favor.
That's awesome, man. Kathy actually also asked, what common characteristics slash skills do you believe are the most important for being a team manager? So I think you spoke a little bit on your responsibilities. Now it's just highlighting those little intuit mechanics that kind of go into your day to day.
Yeah. Just being able to understand because all the players will have different, um, I guess, personalities. So being able to understand what those personalities are and how you can help them, because everyone's going to be different, and just preemptively doing what you can on your side to kind of um, compromise between what the players want and what the players can get, and as well as what the org wants and what the org can get out of the players. And doing that ahead of time definitely speeds a lot of the process up. And when you can speed things like that up and it's just not delayed by waiting for responses and whatnot, then your org likes it when you do that. And then your player also knows that, hey, my manager is keeping my like not only my professional career in check, but also taking into account my personal life. And like things like, oh, I know that X player is looking to visit his family in like 2 weeks. So preemptively, without him needing to tell me, I tell the org, hey, he won't be available for any like in-person content or maybe even online content because he hasn't seen his family in like 6 months, 8 months.
Yeah,
So he wants to spend a lot of time, and I don't want to interrupt him, right?
yeah,
And then when he comes, like, because the players aren't as they won't tell you like weeks in advance. They'll just be like maybe a couple of days in advance. They'll be like, "Hey, I decided I'm going to go see my family." And when you as a player manager can tell them, "Hey, yeah, no, I caught it on your stream like 2 weeks ago. I already cleared it. You're
that's awesome.
already like we've already planned not to schedule anything around that." Then they're like so happy about it, right? It seems like it's a small thing, but those things do add up, and that's essentially how you build a really good relationship with both the players and the orgs.
No, that's really cool, and I feel like if you let's say you just got a job as a team manager or it's something you're an intern for or whatever,
Yeah,
I think those are like the little senior moments that's like almost a gold nugget to take from where it's like
yeah,
you could be preemptive about that stuff. Follow
yeah.
their streams, listen to what they're saying, take their needs and before they're even considering it being a need. And I think that's something that I've never really thought of, and I think that's awesome. I speaking about that, would you say that relationship building and kind of being able to communicate, but also being a friend is almost
Yeah.
part of that skill.
I'd say, yeah, that is super important. Because like there is that line you want to draw between being a player's
Yeah.
manager and being a player's friend. But you can, as long as it's done right, you can still kind of coast in between that. Because if the player only sees you as the manager, they're less likely to do things for you like last minute if something comes up on the manager's side, right? But if they see you more as a friend and you've helped them out personally, professionally in the past, then they're more likely to help you out later down the road as well.
Yeah,
So that
100%.
building a
Yeah.
relationship is probably the most important thing, I'd say.
Yeah, and everyone can kind of take that pretty broad too. I think building relationships and building that friendship, connections really help you because, you when I joined this industry, especially on the sales side, it's very similar. Relationships are a lot. I realized very quickly that this is a very small industry, and you never know where you end up and who turns what. So if you have some favors owed to you, and not even thinking of it like that lens, but if you're just friends with someone, you're more likely to do business or even be partners with from a obviously team manager player perspective. Um, yeah, we have an MVP. Today's MVP of Q&A is Kathy. Love these questions. Thank you, Kathy. The third question is, what was the toughest situation in your career as a team manager that you've had to deal with so far, and how did you manage to overcome those difficulties? So, story time. If you got anything for us, Edwin.
As of right now, the toughest thing would be actually something that just recently happened. Because I'm actually remote and I live in Canada, the when the org and the players are doing in-person IRL content, Obviously, I'd like to be there on site to kind of manage things and make sure the players have what they need, as well as keep the players on their schedule based on what the content team needs. And because as of right now, I'm still here, like doing that remotely is probably the most difficult. But I know that as far as how I'm planning to remedy that, I'm actually moving out to the States here in a month or two. So that'll be taken care of. As far as everything else goes, my personality is a little bit weird and I enjoy things that a lot of people normally don't. So everything else is just it's been a blast. It's been a dream come true. And like if you told me like 10 years ago that I'd be working in esports and not teaching, I would not have believed it.
I'm very glad to hear that's the sentiment shared because I mean, I too feel that same way where it's almost you wake up every day and like, dang, I get to work on not only the team but the
Yeah.
industry that I've wanted to be in forever. So that's great. Do you have any tips from, I guess, because you're kind of an expert at work from home at this point, being Canada and Texas,
Mhm.
kind of thinking about it, very two different contractually, but also distance wise, very far ends of North America, obviously. So I mean, maybe the second follow up for that question is, what about for those who may not be able to move, to either be closer to their team or company or other? Do you have any pro tips on work from home? I assume quarantine and COVID has really helped develop those skills, if anything.
Yeah. As far as tips go, just when you can, like we're doing right now, having calls with your players as well as your coworkers with your video feed on, like that makes a
Okay.
huge difference compared to just having a voice call kind of thing. So, for example, as many of you guys may know, we TSM just recently brought on a Dota 2 team. And when we brought them on, essentially my first priority was because I myself weren't I'm not too familiar with Dota 2 like as it is right now. I played a lot in the past. Um, but the first thing was, hey, I need to get a video call where they can at least see who I am with them right away, kind of thing. Introduce myself, let them know that I'm here to help them, kind of thing. And that video interaction definitely helps build rapport with the players, and that's probably the biggest thing. Um, the next one is, I guess, it really depends on time zone difference too. But that's always really hard to manage, especially if you've got talent that's not in the states, right? Then they're like 10 plus hours time zone difference, and that makes it incredibly hard to kind of manage. Because ideally, you would want to do things on based on like what time zone they're in, right? It's not as hard if it's all in NA because West Coast, East Coast, really only 3 maybe 4 hour difference, but depending on where you are. But something on that, like I personally don't sleep much anyway. Maybe like 4 or 5 hours a day, just because I get bored a lot. So that time zone thing doesn't really affect me, but that is probably one of the other bigger things. And that's, I'd say, actually what helped me build relationships with a lot of the players that I'm working with, just both at TSM as well as just in the Apex scene in general, just because I'm available to them at any time on Discord kind of thing.
Yeah, I really like that. I also really liked your sentiment on video cams. Like,
Yeah.
I think with a lot of companies, if you're new to joining a company, especially if you're like younger, an intern or whatnot, we live in such an unprecedented time. It's very different where communication has been drastically changed in how we approach office life and all that stuff. And I would say webcams have definitely been helpful. We've been on TSM on our side, at least on sales side, has been adding a lot of new faces and a lot of new people. And I think before this call, we were actually even talking about being almost like a preschooler, first day of school, but not knowing anyone, especially if you're new to a company during the COVID. It was really tough. So I
Yeah.
really like that sentiment. Yeah. Kathy actually asked another really great question. How do you deal with motivation issues that might appear within the team members? Burnout is a very common thing, and I think it's one, especially in esports competitive environments where they're going at it 24/7. Is there anything that you, Edwin, like to do to help out or help around the cause, or something that the team handles situations or check-ins or whatnot?
Um, as far as like just dealing with burnout, that's gonna be relevant in both the pro players as well as content creators, and like that extends to like I've thought about it in the past where it also comes from a lot of YouTubers and things like that as well, right? So just planning for that in advance, like I said earlier, when players want to go visit family, like those,
Yeah.
that's when those things become that much more important. And like, especially if you know a team's tournament schedule well enough in advance, you can be like, hey, like 3 months from now, you have like tournaments back to back for like 3 weeks straight. It's going to be a hard time. So, did you want to take like a week or two and go visit family or go visit friends, go offline for a bit? Um, Honestly, that's probably the most important thing, as well as just being there for the players so that you can listen to them. If they ever need someone to talk to, just let them know that you're available. Um, yeah, I'd say that's pretty much it on that end. Burnout is something that everyone's going to experience regardless of what type of job you're in. So just preemptively managing for that and making sure you're not overworking yourself too much and the players aren't overworking themselves too much. Allotting for little breaks here and there. If you're in person, that becomes significantly easier to do. Um, I like to say that if you if you have a good a healthy schedule, that obviously this isn't for everyone, but like a healthy eating schedule as well as working out frequently, like that helps your mental recover significantly. And that's actually something I am planning to introduce to the players when I move out to Austin. And especially because I like to cook. So as far
Yeah.
as eating healthy, they will hopefully be ordering less and less delivery to the house.
That's awesome. I mean, I 100% align with that. Like, you don't even need to be a gym rat or like
Yeah.
a professional athlete to fall in that sentiment. Like, don't get me wrong, I will binge junk food like on the casual basis, but once you change your diet, I always like to say it's like a 3 week kind of habit. Once you build off 3 weeks, you form a habit, becomes a lot easier. But once you change your diet and clean it up slightly, ever slightly, and kind of chop down from it, you guys will be surprised how much more active you are and how wide
Yeah.
awake you are. Like, it got to a point where if I'm like eating way too much sugar or it goes a little bit too hard, I'll crash. I'll be really slow for the day. Big lunches are honestly one of the scariest things. And not to make it seem like, oh, look at us, we're nutritional gurus. But I think it just all goes back to the sentiment of how to avoid burnout and these micro things that you can do to help live a healthier and happier life.
Oh yeah. Yeah. As far as that end, I am definitely not a nutritional guru. I have junk food at every corner of the house, and I'm pretty sure I run on like one or two monsters a day, kind of thing. So yeah,
For me,
but
it's coffee.
as long
Yeah.
as as long as you're still eating like food on top of that, it's good then.
I will footnote that you could still hit a caloric deficit with 4 thin Oreos. That's my little dessert treat if anyone wants to get into the nutritional side of things.
Oh boy.
Number 5, we have another question. What tournaments and events have you run? How did you get involved with tournaments, and any advice for those looking to help with tournaments and events to get more involved? So I would, and maybe to preface this, you can dive a little bit how you kind of interact with tournament organization. Maybe not tournament organization, but how the team kind of gets in and what your role is during these major events, and how you kind of handle that. Because I've always kind of been curious about that on the backside. Obviously you guys do a lot in terms of just competing on a general basis in a competition. Is there anything? Can you dive a little bit into how you operate when there's a big major event going on? What you do for the team, how you get in, etc., like that?
Okay. Well, to be honest, it is TSM, so there
Yeah,
isn't really anything I have to do.
yeah,
As far as whenever like big tournaments, even like whenever they take place, TSM is essentially the first team that gets asked.
yeah.
So I just have to make sure that it works out with their schedule, make sure the players are down to play in it. But for smaller orgs, I'd say participating in a lot of the frequent events, and kind of building a name for yourself. Um, like the amateur tournaments are the ones that I would go through, and especially the ALGS. Obviously, if you can
Yeah.
make it into that, you will start to build a name for your own team. Um, so that's probably your best way. The ESA has an open night every Wednesday, or Wednesday is the pro night, but they have an open night every Tuesday, and that also has like semi-pro teams in it. So that will kind of get your name in there if you can get into those open nights, and then building your way through there, as well as other tournaments to get into the bigger ones, and then you'll slowly start to get invited by the tournament organizers because what a lot of the tournament organizers have done is, from what I can see, they'll take a look at past results and just be like, oh, these 10 teams are the top 10 teams from the ALGS playoffs. Let's invite these guys to our event, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's how that's done.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very insightful, and I think it's not something, at least I myself, my role has never really thought about on a day to day. So sometimes I'm honestly, I'm very, I get curious, more curious after these questions. These are great questions, guys, because every single time I read them, I'm like, oh wow, I've never really thought about that, and I'm sure a lot of people who aren't in that role really think about these micro things. We have another question. We have a question from Mookie who asks, "How do you become a team manager? Where slash how does that process begin?" So more on the realms of kind of getting the job, right? Like I think you spoke a little bit to your story.
Yeah.
Maybe is there any advice, particular advice, certain channels, avenues you have to look at?
As far as roster management goes, obviously as a team manager, you kind of have the final say on it. But it also depends on, especially if it's a team game, it really depends on how they are interacting with the rest of their players. If a player isn't performing well, you don't want to all of a sudden be like, "Hey, sorry, you're going to get cut because you're not performing." You kind of want to dig a little bit deeper into it. How long haven't they been performing well for? Did something happen in their personal life when they started to lose motivation or started underperforming? Is that thing something that we can help out with and maybe help with their mental stress and things like that? I know TSM actually just recently hired a sports psychologist, and that is something that will be unbelievably helpful to a lot of our pro players and a lot of our content creators who do play in a lot of events. But in the end, it comes down to kind of working together with the rest of the team, to figure out, is the player is a player someone that we are going to have to drop, and if so, is there someone else that the players had already had in mind as far as that they would like to pick up as a teammate?
Very cool. What about, sorry for the, I mean, is there, I guess going back to the kind of question on maybe even the application process of how do you get into your role? Do you, like I think you yourself talked about jumping into the link, or you had a very interesting path to it where it's a player
Yeah.
kind of entering and referencing you. But say there is somebody who wants to either start their own journey to get those connections, or even just a place to apply to. Are there any avenues to get the job you kind of recommend?
I would just say keep a track of the orgs that you are interested in, because obviously everyone's got a careers page and they've got certain positions that are open. Especially if there's a specific game that you like, slowly build up while you're filling out those applications. Slowly build up your involvement in the scene itself. Because a lot of what I did for the first year and a half when I first started playing Apex, I was just doing it all because it was fun. It was just a hobby. I never actually planned to work for an org. But then, like a year down the road, I saw, like, especially with ALGS, ways that I could help out. So I applied for maybe 15 to 20 different positions at EA/Respawn. Um, I got shot down for all of them. So don't let that discourage you. Just keep at it. As long as you put in the work, it will show later down the road. Depending how long that is, who knows? But you show passion, you show effort, and it'll hopefully turn out in your favor.
Yeah, it's 100% a process, just with any job, really. You do not need a perfect batting average, right? Like, especially
Yeah,
coming to college, you're gonna go like 1 for 100, right? But
yeah,
all you really need is that one, right?
exactly.
Especially in esports, where if this is your passion, honestly, like, I'm very confident in saying no matter what team you're on, you're gonna find a lot of moments where you're like, wow, I'm in esports. May not even be a team. It might be just it might be a third party vendor or whatever it is with an industry. But once you're tapping in and once you kind of start that ball rolling, the rest is history. But the only way to get it rolling is if you just keep at it and keep grinding
Yeah,
and
yeah.
sending out messages.
A lot of people do get like when they hand in their resumes or their cover letters and they get denied, then a lot of people will take that really personally and be like, well, okay, maybe this isn't something I can do, kind of thing. And you can't put yourself down like that. You gotta just keep going at it. Don't worry too much about the rejections, because like you said, 1 in 100, you just need the one, right?
Yep, absolutely. Great, all great points. At this time, I'd actually like to remind everyone to ask questions. You want to head to the discord.gg/TSMU and ask your questions in the Ask Stream Questions Here channel. Once you've asked your question, join the waiting room voice channel to wait to be selected and on the show if it is a voice question. Um, all great things you've done so far. You've answered so far, Edwin. It's been super interesting. We actually have another question. We have a question, sorry, from Gaddafi, who asks, "How much involvement do you have with with the new Dota 2 roster, and how would an amateur T2 team go about setting up a script with them?" So maybe a new challenger afoot, trying to jump in. But any insight on the Dota team? I'm sure fans are really interested in how we're doing there and how we're setting that up.
I just got started with them. Like I mentioned earlier, I did my video introduction as soon as we signed with them. And they actually have a coach slash manager of their own, like from when they were known as Undying. And essentially, I'm just working with her to manage like the day to day, if they've got their merch, if they've got their gear. As far as the actual competitive side goes, I just keep a track of the tournaments and scrims and their results. But as far as setting those scrims up, that's actually done internally on their end by their captain, Moon Meander, and their coach, Stina. So you would have to get in contact with them. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to help on that one. Mostly because I think it is a new signing. Obviously, later down the road, once I get more familiar with the team dynamics, because I don't want to all of a sudden insert myself and be like, "Hey, this is how I want things done." I'm kind of gonna sit back and observe how they do things and kind of blend myself into their process. That way, they don't feel overwhelmed. Um, yeah, that's how it is so far with the Dota 2 team. I'm really enjoying my time with them. They're a really upbeat group. So I definitely can't wait to meet up with them. Like I've had the video call, and now I can't wait to go meet up with them when I get into the States a couple of months down the road.
Yeah, that's super interesting context. I think I'm sure, and I think it also speaks a lot to your earlier points on relationship building and kind of that, like, being personal and close to the team and players itself. Because I feel like if you're coming from a smaller org, I'm sure it's very scary. When you're kind of getting
Yeah,
picked up by a big org where it's like, what's gonna happen? Like, are we all on the trading block? Like, what are the processes? TSM is a big org. What are they? And I think there's a lot of times a bigger narrative, and I'm sure it's even more so with traditional sports where you're like a small fish in a pond, no matter how big of a player you are. It's almost like, okay, what's gonna go happen? There's some uncertainty. But the fact that not only you, but I'm sure all the other team managers and all our teams handle is it's more of that personal level. It really kind of helps soothe out that discomfort of, like, big org, what's gonna happen, right? And I think that's
yeah,
really cool context that it's like, yes, we are a pretty big company with like a lot of value and a lot of money and a lot of things coming our way, but we treat all of our teams as family.
yeah.
And I think that's really cool. And I think that's a really interesting perspective and just speaks a lot to not only TSM, but team managers as a whole. So very cool. We have another question that's kind of going back into, I guess, just like your little history and background of who you are and what it is. But what made you want to work in TSM and esports? I know you said you were a fan and you kind of jumped into Apex a little bit, but is this an underlying passion that came out that ended up being a job, or is this like your whole point has always been get into esports? And I know you kind of answered that a little bit, but maybe kind of
Yeah.
refresh there.
I'd say, yeah, I never had plans to get into esports. I watched a lot of esports back in the day. Like, I'm talking like way back in the StarCraft Brood War days, all the way. And then I started with the reason I the reason I wanted to join TSM was because of like LCS Season 2, like way back. Um, and like I remember watching all the LCS games every single weekend. And obviously, because all the events were live in the States, I couldn't attend them myself. But I like that was something like, oh man, if this could happen in the future, that'd be super cool. But during that time, I was in my day job and everything, and I just thought that was like a dream that would never really happen. But then when those opportunities came up about 2 years, a year and a half ago, I kind of just I said, screw it, I'll jump on it, see how it works out, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then I'll have to figure something out later down the road.
That's awesome, Edwin. I feel like we're really in sync here and we're really bonding because I too also saw the potential and really wanted to make it kind of like almost a job maybe in the near future because of LCS season two.
Yeah.
Um, I think it also came from, I think that was around like PAX West if I remember correctly, or maybe it was a little bit earlier, where it was right before the studio tour for that. But I actually, for me personally, I know no one gives a crap about me, and this is really the Edwin show, so I apologize. But
Oh,
I was the TSM FTX alley of Athenian High School in Danville, California, and I started a high school club and sent my
oh
team, a bunch of
man.
silver and bronze players, to Seattle, and we got a trip going, and that's what really made
No,
it for me.
those are so fun though, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I was like 18 years old and kind of going to my first gaming convention. I was like, oh my god, they're bigger nerds as I am. Like this is awesome. And it's just those
Um,
moments. Yeah, sorry, you're good.
oh no, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, honestly, if you're in high school, if you're a high school viewer or a college viewer, like, really take those moments to heart. I think it's like one of those times I was just like, oh, this is cool. It's the gaming industry, and obviously now there's a huge explosion, and parents everywhere can kind of see the possibilities of it. So there's not that much of a friction as maybe you and I might have had when you were younger.
Oh yeah.
But I would say it's those moments that you really kind of hit those soul searching points where you're like, this is where I should be. This is where I should go. Find the plethora of opportunities that's the right fit for you within the industry, and I think that's sick. So season two, League of Legends. I also too played Brood War. I was a Protoss player, pretty crap, but
Oh yeah, I wasn't too good. That's why I was a viewer, not a player.
was it Battle.net? Oh
Oh
man.
boy, yeah. All the late AM nights spent watching the Korean leagues play too and everything.
Oh
Oh
yeah,
boy.
yeah. I used to watch Day Night TV, and I
Oh
was a
yeah.
fanboy of Idra.
His
So
casting was top tier for sure.
he's the OG for sure. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We have another question, kind of going back to your career again. How did you get your first job in the industry? So I know you kind of spoke a little bit into, getting to know players and kind of that intro route applying there. But the follow part of that is maybe can be broadened out to just general job experience, general. What was the experience like, and do you have any advice for others landing that first job? So maybe broadening it out a little bit from esports and really just kind of answering that part of it, which we haven't yet, which is just landing a first job in general, right?
You mean like my first job? Well, I guess like a job in esports or
I would say maybe a little bit both because I do know you answered the esports part of it, so that's why I was maybe asking to follow up. Like, what about those who just want to get a job coming out of college?
oh, okay. So like right now that's it's changed like how you get a job has changed quite significantly, especially with what COVID has done to essentially everything. But like even now, college isn't something there's obviously a lot of degrees or there's obviously a lot of jobs where college is still a requirement. Like you need those degrees and you need those PhDs and everything to land certain jobs. But with how just the world is right now, it isn't a necessity. Now, like you mentioned earlier, parents are more receptive towards jobs where you don't need to take 4 years of college or 4 years of university. You can even just take a 2 year college course and learn a trade and grab a job that way. But it's mostly about maintaining relationships during that period while you're in college or while you're doing trade school. And when you do land your first co op job and that kind of thing, and making sure that it starts off well and it ends off well as well. And just learning things along the way because it learning things along the way definitely helps. Like I worked as, like I mentioned earlier, I worked as a Kumon instructor. I also did a lot of private tutoring. I worked as a Best Buy computer sales rep. I also worked for the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Commission as a server admin. I've done a lot of variety of jobs and met a lot of different types of people, and I made a ton of mistakes early on, right? But it's making sure that you learn from those mistakes and you kind of use it as you use it when you're at your next job and making sure, hey, I learned how to talk to these types of people in my previous job, so and they hated me because I wasn't receptive enough. So now I'll take that into account to my next job. And if I run into that type of personality again, I know like I can do things differently and make sure that they're happy on their end, make sure that I'm also happy on my end. Um, just keeping track of all of that, I'd say is the most important. But as far as landing your first job, just don't give up. Apply for multiple jobs. Don't be afraid of rejection. That's going to be key because there's so many people applying for jobs straight out of college, and it's going to be hard. And you're gonna get turned down, and you're gonna feel bad. But you just gotta get back on.
Yeah, 100% snaps on that, and I would also add to that, it is very, very rare that your first job is going to be your dream job. It goes
Yeah,
back to that 1 in 100, but I think it goes back to any experience is great experience. Personally, that's the way I like to go at things. Super aligned with you, Edwin. For my first job, I was so bad at it. I was horrible, and but I think it was like for me personally, I took that experience of okay, what do I want now? Like, what can I learn from that? And how do you move forward from it? I think it's so easy to fall in the rut of be like, I'm trash, I'm horrible, get lost, kid. But
yeah,
in reality, it's just if a job also has to be it's two-way. I think a lot of times there's this almost superiority conflicts or contrast, whatever the word is, relationship, with when you're implying where you're like, oh man, like I need to please them, like I need to be the best version of me. I need to impress them. It's also a two-way interview and a two-way
yeah,
relationship, especially in your first job too. I wouldn't take that to surprise, and then obviously be honest with yourself. Okay, if the first job isn't working out, what's not working out about it, right? Sometimes it is you, but for the most part, it's just, if anything, it's just because it's not aligned right. And you should take that as experience and kind of grow from that. So I would very much agree.
yeah. The thing you mentioned about the two-way interview, that's like something I 100% agree on. Not only are they interviewing you for the position,
Yep.
but you're also interviewing them, the company, on whether you want to work there, right? You can't think like, oh, I need to get hired by these guys. It's like, what can I do to help this company, and what can they do to help me, kind of thing, right?
100%. Yep, yep. We have another question. How would you recommend reaching out to other people in the esports industry for networking? How do you make that first step into building that connection? Yeah, I mean, you had a very interesting story that just highlights your expertise in kind of navigating those relationships and conversations. Yeah, how do you even get that first one? Any tips there?
I would say Twitch.
Yeah.
Social media is really important these days. My like the way I got in essentially was just being a part of the Twitch community on multiple streamers. Obviously, when I started, I was brand new. No one knew who I was, and I kind of just helped out with the small things here and there. And I didn't look for anything else in return, mostly because I was just doing it because I had fun doing it, and it was a good escape from my regular job, my day job that I had back then.
Yeah.
And just building yourself in the community, whether, like I said, whether it be Twitch or through Twitter, um, that definitely helps as far as recognition later down the road goes. It is kind of hard to do, I guess, what you would call a cold call and trying to get into a position. If you can definitely get recommendations from someone, like it doesn't even have to be the biggest player. It can be someone who also works in that industry that you've built a close friendship with, right? You can be like, hey, I'm applying for this job. Can I write you down as a reference? And can you just let them know, like, even though I don't have any experience in this industry, I'm eager to learn, I'm willing to put in the effort, and I like work, I enjoy this industry. So like I would go above and beyond kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I would also add to that in terms of a portfolio, right? Like I think part of that is also how do you get to know someone if you don't know anyone at all? A lot of it is LinkedIn messaging and obviously going to these events and exactly what you're doing, talking to these players and making those
Mhm.
relationships, or even anybody in the esports, if it's an assistant, if it's a part-time contractor, maybe it's even just a security guard, right? Like anyone that those types of relationships, they kind of know people. And then I think at the same time, when you ask those questions, it's almost like find a way to show that you also have value, right?
Yeah.
Yes, to technically do work at TSM, you should be hired at TSM and doing all that stuff, right? But ideas come from anywhere. I'm sure you all have been sitting in your bed, playing games, watching competitive games. You're like, oh, this is an idea that they should do. Write that down, create a deck. It could work for any other job or any other industries, and present that being like, hey, like I have this awesome idea that might make your might make your life better at TSM as a team manager because of
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z, right? Here's an awesome idea. At the same time, I admire you. I saw you on TSMU, Edwin, and I think all your points resonated. I'd love to just get to know you on a personal level on that one-on-one. You see how that's kind of build out to like a raw conversation to really start that drive. And sometimes they won't respond. Sometimes you'll get Christian Lee, happy on like an 8 a.m. because I'm about to close the deal, sipping coffee, and of course I'll answer that. Right? A lot of it is timing, and you never really know.
Yeah.
But I think for me personally, when I'm looking at student inboxes, I always appreciate it when it's not just, "Hey, can you jump on a call?" versus, "Hey, here's an awesome idea. Like this is what I've been
Mhm.
doing. Right? Can I love your points X, Y, and Z. It's something that also just shows that you're paying attention and not copy pasting a template intro through across any
Yeah.
of your reaches.
For like 50 different people.
Yeah, exactly. I've had it. I can't tell you how many times I haven't even gotten Christian. Like I get like people from like randomly around TSM, like I could tell you just copy pasted.
Oh
um,
boy.
yep, yep. We have another question from Mookie. Follow up on Kathy's question. How do you deal with tougher parts of roster management? If the player isn't performing well, isn't responding well, and the rest of the team, etc.
Um, I guess because I personally don't deal with whether roster swaps happen or contracts and things like that. That's mostly dealt with just upper management, general manager, those kinds of positions. But on a ground level, I try to figure out why they aren't performing or why they aren't getting along with their teammates. And trying to take into account all everyone involved, like their feelings, is going to be the most important. Obviously, if it's something that you can't solve, then you'll have to bump it up to upper management. And at least when you do bump it up to upper management, you can explain to them, hey, so and so isn't performing well, and they aren't performing well because over the past few months they haven't been getting along with their teammates, and there's just been a lot of tension, right? Then you can present that to your upper management, and then they'll know what to do from there. Whereas another situation could be like, hey, so and so hasn't been performing well over the past few months, but it was due to like tension between the teammates, but I got them together. We went out, we did some team bonding exercises. They're getting along a lot better now. Results won't show instantly, but I'll keep an eye on their performance over the next few months and see if that improves. If not, then I'll let you guys figure out what you want to do with it. But kind of having that deck planned for the upper management so that they can figure out what to do a lot quicker so that they don't have to do that research. because as a team manager, you're more involved with the players day to day anyway. So it's easier and more efficient for you to do it as opposed to them. Um, so that's essentially how I would go about those situations.
That's really cool, really interesting, and I think it's something that not again not a lot of people think about because there's always that sad goodbye and an announcement that kind of comes with the thing. But it's like, what can you do
Yeah.
to, either improve their performance, their mental aspect of it, or just the team environment. So really cool.
Like a
Yes,
thing I think is really important, especially in the esports industry right now, is that having some sort of therapist or sports
yeah,
psychologist on hand, like these players that are growing up in this industry are young,
yeah,
so like mentally they will take a hit from time to time when they aren't performing. They'll just beat themselves down even more and be
yeah.
like, oh, I'm not as good as I was before, I'm shit, that kind of stuff. But that's not the case, right? Maybe they are going through a slight slump, but you gotta kind of hype them up, let them know that, hey, as long as you put in the effort, that will pass. And if not, there are things we can do to help you take care of that later down the road. Maybe we'll lessen how often you stream just so you can have a break from that. And like I said about the whole eating or dieting thing and working out, we'll add that from time to time so your brain can kind of get a reset and maybe you'll end up playing better as well. So like those are really important, and it is a thing a lot of the orgs are now taking into account. I know a lot of orgs have sports psychologists on hand now. So that's, I think, something that's really important, because yeah, the players are definitely on the younger side as far as their careers go, and all of a sudden they've run into all this money and all this fame and success. And when anything starts to interrupt that later down the road, they take it a lot harder than you normally would.
No, I think that's awesome, and I love how that's the direction the industry is kind of moving on towards, and it just speaks a lot about our growth as an industry and us as a culture in general. So really
Yeah.
cool. It's question 12 is a little more on the fun side. Speed Chef asks, "What's your favorite esports genre and your personal favorite Apex Legends character?"
Esports genre. Honestly, I don't. I'd have to say battle royales. I played like 8 to 10 years of League. I got banned a lot for verbal abuse.
Oh no.
Yeah, so that happened. That's actually why I how I wound up playing Apex in the first place, because I had like because when I was working and stuff, I essentially lived paycheck to paycheck, so I couldn't afford to like buy a level 30 account and
Yeah.
just play ranked. So when I got banned, I had to grow one from level 1 to level 30 before I
Oh
could re-rank.
no.
So it was like after my fifth ban, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And my brother was like, hey, why don't you just play Apex with me, kind of thing. And that's how that happened. But BR's favorite genre, and as far as favorite character in Apex, Caustic. I'm a giant charge rifle Caustic toxic main. But it seems like they will be nerfing him a little bit. So who knows if that'll change over the next few weeks.
So you guys heard it first. You'll see a lot more of him in your matches coming up in the
Yeah.
professional matches before he gets there for Edwin. For Edwin.
Yeah.
We have another question on organization. How do you stay organized? What organizational programs, processes, or tools do you use, and any advice to on how to use them?
I've actually I've tried out a variety of the organizational, I guess, apps you want to call it. A lot of them now have browser-based ones too. But what I use right now is something called Airtable. I've run through things like Trello, Monday.com, and things like that. But Airtable I've found works the best for how I operate, and just keeping a good calendar or planner so that you have everything scheduled. Organizing those events and things like that into their own specific categories. Because like obviously I have a lot of TSM stuff, but then I also have a lot of side contract gigs where I'm helping other tournament organizers with their events. And like I have all of those marked off as separate categories. And obviously I include even small things like my personal life, like, oh, I gotta go to the gym at this time. I gotta make sure I'm taking care of my chores at home at this time. Just everything is structured as much as possible. And I'm normally that kind of person, a little bit on the OCD side. So I enjoy doing that kind of stuff. Um, and yeah, that's Airtable is usually how I stay organized.
Oh, that's really cool. I think every position that I've talked to and kind of met, they handle it very differently. It really also depends on what your role and job entails, but it's always cool to hear about new programs. Haven't heard of Airtable, so maybe I'll give it a shot because I wish I was very good organizationally. So it would definitely help my job on a day-to-day basis. So that's great
Yeah.
advice. Our final question is, what do you like the most about your job and the work that you're doing? I think there's a lot that you can obviously throw in. But are there any key specific outliers that just help you wake up and be like, dang, this is
Oh
awesome?
man, the perks at TSM are quite nice.
They are.
Especially with like how like with my whole like financial situation and just living situation in general, like over the past like 5 to 8 years or whatever. When TSM was filming content in December with the Apex guys, I just assumed, hey, I'd be doing everything remotely. And but then when Apex LAN got canceled in January, and that's when I was supposed to meet up with the players in person for the first time. But because that got canceled, TSM was like, hey, do you want to come out to the content filming and like meet the players, see how everything works, and see how you like it, kind of thing. And I told them, I was like, hey, that means I have to do like COVID test before I get there, like before I leave. When I on my way back, there's the flight, there's the hotel. Like, are you sure? And they're just like, yeah, go for it. It's like in their minds, it was worth like me building that relationship with the players, and the fact that they took that into account really makes me appreciative of things like that, and just makes me want to work harder. And obviously, meeting all the players and streamers is definitely one of the other perks that I know I'm sure everyone would love to have.
I too share that sentiment, and I think honestly, especially it's really present in the teams that you're in your own kind of personal team in Silo. But I think TSM does a pretty good job in making sure that we're respected and treated well, and a lot of that goes to with awesome managers that are kind of on at TSM. Yeah, with that, I think that kind of closes up shop. I wanted to thank everyone, all of you guys for viewing, but also Edwin, thank you so much for joining. I learned quite a bit today, and I thought this was a really interesting and unique episode. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on the Q&A, and thank you for everyone that's watching and everyone that had input on the questions and everything. I've had a ton of fun. I'd love to do this again later in the future, maybe when I am in Austin. I definitely have a couple fun things planned for the Apex community. I know the Apex community just in general is lacking a lot of our IRL content that they would love to see amongst all the teams. So that is one of the things on my to-do list when I get down there, especially with how many content creators and pros are living in Austin right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Big things coming, everyone. Staying tuned.
Yep.
Edwin, hope to see you in LA as well. Would love to see you around the facility more and get a hangout. So hopefully we'll see you soon in LA. Yeah, thank you so much for joining everyone again. The next episode will feature our special guest Josiah Newsom from Intel on February 9th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Be sure to follow the channel so you know when we're live, and please join TSMU at discord.gg/TSMU. Thanks, everyone.